Okay, welcome. Um, we started on time, except we had a little bit of technical difficulties, which is the story of my life. But we're here. We're good. We're starting a 15-minute webinar, and hopefully you guys can hear us and see our screen. If not, just pop it into the Q&A section, and we'll figure out what's going on. So my name is Christina, and I'm the training director here at Extended Disc. And with me today is my colleague, Markku Kauppanen, president of Extended Disc.
Hi, Christina, and hello, everybody.
Hello. So today I asked Markku to join me because a lot of us don't need to know this, but I've gotten questions about it, and I personally find it fascinating, which is the extended DISC model. What does it measure? What does the assessment measure? What does the assessment not measure? So I've asked Markku here to kind of help me out. But before, I'm gonna let him speak, I promise. But we aren't taking questions live, so put any questions in the Q&A section, and I promise we'll follow up with you after. And I am recording it, so if you guys, come in late or you need to leave earlier, you want to share this information with somebody, we will give you the information about where we would put the recording.
Sounds good.
All right, let's go, Markku.
Where should we start?
Well, let's kind of start with what is DISC? Where did it even come from? The DISC model itself.
Well, I mean, some people know this, but a lot do not, is that nobody actually owns the DISC model because it was developed back in 1928 by William Moulton Marston, good-looking fellow there. He really based his model, the DISC model, on Carl Jung's work back in 1921, so only 7 years earlier. Carl Jung wrote a book called Psychological Types that really laid the foundation for really all today's behavioral assessments. Myers-Briggs, DISC, all of them come from that foundation. But Marston was the first one to name the quadrants D, I, S, and C.
And usually what I say about him is, he really just kind of wanted to create this tool that made it easy for us to understand and identify certain behavioral styles. And what's interesting about him, not only is his name really long, but he actually is not just the father of DISC, but he also happens to be the creator of Wonder Woman. So very cool. He didn't create any of the tools himself. He just kind of laid the foundation, the model itself.
Yeah, he came up with the model, and nobody actually owns the model. So today in the marketplace, we have a handful of DISC theory-based tools, and extended DISC is one of those. The first tools really were developed in the early 1950s. Extended DISC has been around almost 30 years. The first tool was developed in 1994. The company actually goes further back, but the first sort of software version of the tool was launched in 1994.
Right. So a lot of you might get questions like, oh, I've taken DISC. What is extended DISC? Well, we don't have time to talk about it today, but we do have other webinars and lots of information on our website you can find out.
I mean, quickly, because it comes up so often, that the main difference between DISC and extended DISC is that extended DISC really measures that hardwired DISC style, who the person actually is. So when people take it over time, kind of like with Myers-Briggs, your personality type does not change. The same is true with extended DISC. So we can really identify the accurate starting point for helping people to become more successful.
So to help us understand, what does DISC measure? What does DISC not measure? Let's talk a little bit more about what the DISC model is.
Well, I think one of the greatest things about the DISC model is that it makes no value judgments. There is no one best style. Now, we may have some views that I like D styles best, or I like S styles best.
My style's better.
Exactly. Typically, it's very much driven and biased by our own personal style. But the model itself makes no value judgments. They are simply different types of styles, each style having their own unique strengths and development areas. And of course, their own challenges, but there's no one best style. We see successful individuals coming from all backgrounds, all kind of educational degrees, etc., and also all different DISC styles. So no matter what your DISC style is, it does not limit your success in life in any way at all.
Right. So, a lot of us think, oh, well, they're a D. Well, we'll talk about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, let's get now into the extended DISC model. To me, this is fascinating, and we'll try to explain it in the simplest of terms. So there are different ways to kind of, you may have seen the extended DISC model before, but I like to use this pyramid because it's kind of a very practical, intuitive way for me to understand it. So I figure if I do, you guys out there will. So at the bottom of this pyramid, you can see there's 4 sections to this pyramid. There's culture, there's natural style, there's, what did we call this again?
Behavioral filters.
Thank you. And we have conscious behavior at the top. So should we start with culture, what it is?
Yeah, the reason of the culture is at the bottom of the pyramid, if you will. It's the foundation because we must understand that we need to interpret the DISC results in context of culture. People know that I'm not originally from Finland. If you listen to my voice for the first time, I'm
Not
sure you
originally from
I'm
where?
sorry. I'm sorry. Not from the United States. I've been here so long. I was born in Finland, but now live in the United States almost 40 years now. But if you think about, for example, United States and Finland, you can use DISC in any culture, but you need to understand the cultural context. If you think about the words we use to describe the different DISC styles, for example, like let's take an I style, outgoing. What the meaning of the word outgoing is in United States, it's quite different in Finland. So you need to understand that we need to interpret the results in the cultural context. And you can break it down even further. Like if you think about what the word fast-paced means in New York City versus here down in Houston, there's a slight variance there. So you need to understand that. You can take to the cultures of organization. Different organizations tend to have a different kind of culture. So it's always important to understand in what context we interpret the actual assessment results.
Yeah, and I always say culture is one of those things that you tend to bring with you. So like if you're, someone from the United States and you become an expat, you become in charge of a group, say in another country, that cultural belief that you have tends to go with you.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of case studies when people move to another country and they work there as expats and they have some challenges interacting with the nationals because the cultural differences. The intent is good and they want to achieve good results,
right,
but it doesn't translate well in the cultural context.
So extended DISC does not measure culture, correct?
We don't measure culture, but we
it
do.
Is part of.
We need to understand the culture in which we interpret it. And when we do the validation studies, we validate internationally. We can't take one validation and say this is valid for the entire world. If you think about that, really, you understand quickly how that is not simply possible. That's why we revalidate it every 2 years throughout the world.
Right. And, in terms of, I do get asked that question about culture, and the extended DISC tool is essentially an analytical tool. It only knows that you selected a certain style consistently, like D or I, S or C, but it does not predict your behaviors of that style. That itself can be culturally based.
Yeah, it happens in that culture because the culture is our shared values. We know what we are supposed to do, what we are not supposed to do, because that's what we are taught from a very early childhood, from our parents, our family, school, our entire environment. We know what are the cultural norms that is acceptable, what is good behavior, what is bad behavior.
Okay, so let's now talk about the key thing that the extended DISC tool does measure, and that is our unconscious behavior, or as it's shown in the assessment, our natural style, profile 2.
Yeah, we really focus on that. The hardwired behaviors is important. It's critical really to know, because if we want to become more successful, we must create that very confident self-awareness. Once we are able to make peace with who we truly are, it's the only way that we can really begin to modify behavior or make plans or think about how we interact with different individuals in different settings. If we don't know from where we are modifying our behavior from, we are going to be lost. It's just like trying to go on a road trip and you know what your destination is. But if you don't know where you are right now, you don't know which way to go.
Yeah, and simply put, I always say your natural style is just how you prefer to go about the day.
That's the kind of behavioral style that's most comfortable to you. Sometimes we call it our comfort area. It's the kind of behavior we tend to revert to in times of stress and pressure, because that is the behavior that simply flows freely
and doesn't take extra energy.
That's right.
So with the behavioral filters, this is kind of where I, as a trainer, find people sometimes get tripped up. So, you think about these behavioral filters, things like your own skills, your experience, your knowledge, your values, your attitude. I always say, remember, extended disc focuses on your behaviors because that's an aspect of who you are that you can make adjustments to.
Hmm.
However, what differentiates you from other people are, these behavioral filters that you see in front of you, like your experience, like your skills. So if you have two D styles, how do you differentiate? I always challenge people, how do you differentiate those two D styles? Are they automatically the same? Of course not. One D might be someone who's been in the business for 20 years. The other D might have a great attitude, or a bad attitude. So these behavioral filters kind of separate out, but extended disc does not measure that.
Yeah, as you know, there's no one assessment that measures everything about a given individual. Each tool is designed to measure a specific thing, and what extended disc measures is how we do things. So if we really want to have a full idea or full sort of a holistic view of who the individual is, we do need to think about things like values and skills and many of these other things that we have listed here, because they obviously have an impact how a person will perform. What DISC will tell us is how we will react to different kind of stimuli in environment. If you have two identical DISC profile twos or the national styles, they will react to their environment and other people very similarly, but how they actually perform and how successful are these other things, of course, we need to take into account.
Exactly. And then we have the last part of the pyramid, which extended disc does measure. But Markku, can you address conscious behavior?
Well, conscious behavior is really how we think we need to interact with our environment, other people, different situation at a given time. So we have these views, what we think will make ourselves successful in a given environment. So this is something that really changes actually throughout the day. If I'm interacting with different styles of people, if I have an idea who they are, what their preferences are in terms of communication, decision-making, everything, then I probably should need to make some conscious adjustments to our behavior. So it's conscious behavior because we are actually thinking about how we need to adjust.
Right. And I always tell people, in the profile one, it's called perceived need to adjust. And it's a perception, which is like, it's a belief that if I were to make these adjustments to my style at this point in time, so it's like a snapshot in time, I feel that I could be more successful. However, unlike natural style, it's not necessarily grounded. It does not predict your success. We don't even know if you actually would make those types of adjustments or not. It is a perception that you might.
That is correct. And of course, ultimately why we are using extended disc is we try to help people become more successful.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we do become more successful is that we have very clear decisions about how to modify our behavior. Really, that is that conscious behavior. And ultimately, we want to be in a situation where we know who we are, we have that confident self-awareness, but we are continually and constantly making changes to our behavior in order to achieve those desired outcomes.
Great. So I just want to just kind of bring it back to the extended disc diamond, because you don't see this model, you don't see that pyramid model in any of the reports, but it kind of gives us a background of why we have this extended disc diamond model in front of us.
Well, it really becomes a visual map for us to understand how we want to modify our behavior and to understand that what do we measure with extended disc, because extended disc measures how we do things, how we do everything. Not only, because this is one thing that keeps coming up, and I was at a conference last week, a lot of people talked about extended disc, their clients, and they mentioned that it's a fantastic tool to help people to improve their communication. And I think that's one of the biggest misunderstanding of this tool. They think of it as a communication tool. Yes, communication tool it is, and it can be very helpful in that because communication is part of almost everything we do. But since it explains and measures how we do things, how we do everything, not only communicate, but how we make decisions, how we deal with change, how we manage our time, how we lead, sell, work in teams, on and on and on. You have to think about it. It measures how we do everything. And whenever you want to know that, that's when you can use this tool, because if you also want to help people to understand how they can get better, then this tool can help.
Excellent. That's a great way to sum it up. Thanks, Markku. So, like I said, we just gave you a brief overview of it, but I'll be publishing a blog that will go into a little more detail about the extended disc model for you guys, kind of. I call, I don't know, nerds out there, I guess. But if you guys want to learn more about it, I'll have more information. And we also do have a lot of information on our public extended disc website, where you can also find out about our next webinar as well as other upcoming webinars. The next one we'll have is called the Admin Site Overview, Managing Your Extended Disc Assessments. So join us next Wednesday, March 18th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you, Marku.
Thank you. And go to extendeddisk.org, like Christina just mentioned, and on the top right-hand corner, you see the events tab. Click on that. You see all the upcoming webinars, and register even if you can't make the date and time, because we'll send you a recording. Also, kind of a timely topic is that we have a lot of virtual training materials. As you know, most of our training is delivered virtually. If you're a facilitator and at these unique times, you probably still are tasked to develop your employees, your clients. And if you need any help conducting virtual training around extended disc assessments and you don't have access to those materials, let us know and we'll make sure you get them.
Oh, that's a great point. Thanks, Marku. All right, everyone, have a great day.
Thank you.